Welcome to the Practice Podcast, conversations probing the nature of practice. I'm your host, Dave Fearon. Instead of this episode being another conversation between Peter and me, we've added a third party. And we'll be doing this periodically and placing these three-way conversations among our various episodes for two reasons at least. One, because when you hear Cristina today, you're hearing our subject, which is practice. Practice is an individual thing. It's from the inside out. This is Cristina managing her life experiences in a practiced way. And I think that'll come through when you listen to her, as will be the case in future people, former students of mine, colleagues, peers and mine, and others who we will bring into three-way conversations. And rather than have you wait until episode 17 or 18 to hear those, we've decided to place them early in the sequence, and then every 2 or 3 episodes, there'll be a break so you can hear a real live practitioner. Not that Peter and I aren't alive or practitioners. I think you'll enjoy the variety and the other way of looking at this pivotal question. Well, today we have added a new feature to our practice of podcasting about practice. Today we have Cristina Negron Mitusina with us for a three-way conversation, but the focus will be primarily on her. I thought of a word that I would use to describe Cristina before we began, and that word is growthful. I've known Cristina for over 20 years. She was my student in our undergraduate program in management, and all the years that I've stayed in touch with her since, and she's visited my classes to share her life story with them, and particularly her managerial life, I've seen growth. So, Cristina, welcome.
Thank you.
Why have you continued to be growthful this long into your adult life?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm mentoring my niece who's just starting college, and we had this conversation just the other day. And she said, kind of tell me your story and how'd you get to where you are. And I think for me, it's always been innate. I've always been looking for the next thing or what, I kind of say to people, I consider myself, having this toolbox. And so what are the tools that I need to put into this box? And so when I'm in a role, I'm just constantly looking for what skills and what knowledge is this role adding to my toolbox. And once I feel like I have what I need, it's time for me to move on. So I had a leader once consider me for a role and say, I look at your resume and it seems that about the time that I graduated from college, I was in roles for about 2-year periods at a time. And so I would keep moving. And so her concern was, after 2 years, will you leave? And I said, it all depends on what you put in my box, because I really just love learning and growing. And I feel like I'm a much better HR professional as I continue to add to my toolbox. So I consult better. I have a better understanding of the organization. I can troubleshoot and problem solve. But I feel I've always known that I could not stay still, and that I couldn't be one of those people that stayed in a role for 30 years doing the same thing day in, day out. And I knew that about myself. And I give credit to people that become subject matter experts very deep in their discipline. I just didn't feel that would be me. I just felt that I needed to be a well-rounded professional, and I needed to move around the organization in order to do that.
And you certainly did in all those years.
Do you actually use the word toolbox to yourself?
I do,
Cristina. And can you give me maybe an example of one or two tools that you have recently placed in your toolbox?
So I would say in the last role that I had at Aetna, I was leading onboarding. And so I was onboarding and employee experience. And for me, it was, how do I make these experiences for new hires and existing and candidates? How do I make these things better? So I added understanding the role of the new hire, and so walking through the path that a new hire takes when they join an organization, but also candidates. So when we're vetting candidates, what does that experience end to end look like? And in order to understand that, I had to walk the journey and collect information through different parts of the organization that candidate touches.
Oh, that's helpful.
Yeah.
That's helpful. And you feel that after a while you had acquired the ability and the knowledge to do those things?
Yes. Yes.
How long did it take?
So when I joined the org, the leader said to me, this is the task that I'm giving you. We need to create a better experience. Something in this chain is broken, and our role in shared services is to serve our customer. And for me, my customer was recently new hires and candidates. And so I had to experience all of those things and reach out to people in various HR organizations that own the work. I think the biggest challenge was that I didn't own any of it. These candidates were being connected to through either talent acquisition or compensation if they were a highly compensated person. But I owned the overall experience end to end. And so my task when I first started in the role was submersing myself in that experience. So mapping, doing process mapping. And so it took probably a good 3 weeks to map everything out and document everything and interview everyone and collect data. So it was about a good 3 weeks.
Oh, okay. But you're not saying, you're not saying that you had sort of milked your job for all there was in it in 3 weeks.
No, that was just the data collection. Understanding how the process was working in the current state. Then we had to identify all the pain points and then figure out what did we want that experience to look like moving forward. And then infusing all of those things through the organization. So then it was, mapping out, what did we want best practice to be? What did we want candidates and new hires to experience from us? And then implementing those things, which took some time. As this experience unfolded with the new hires and the candidates, did you find as you worked with them and talked to them and observed them, did you find there were aspects of their life that you had overlooked in your initial scan of the experience? Yes, I think the experience that was happening was really mechanical. So it was, check these boxes.
Yeah.
Because these are the things we need in order to move you through the process. But there was no accounting for the person, for their circumstance, for their particular role. For example, we hire a lot of medical directors. And we had medical directors that were working in hospitals around the clock. So they would work, 24-hour shifts. And so how do you ask someone to go to do a drug test when they're in the ER, or in a hospital environment for days on end? So it's really looking at how, we clearly want to hire people and we want to onboard them effectively and efficiently. But how do we do that when people are so different and roles are so different? So it was making those considerations.
Yeah, good. So this was one whole package of learning experiences for you. but it was not the whole experience of the job.
Right.
So what else?
So I was also leading a team that I was trying to transform from being operational and tactical to being more about experience. So we were transitioning them to be onboarding experienced leaders and helping people walk through this process. So I was managing a team that was supporting talent acquisition, a team that was supporting talent management. So we had our own, we called Aetna University, and it was the arm of HR that managed all of the learning that happened in the organization. And so my team supported that organization as well as doing the onboarding and the new hire experience.
What would be an example of what that team produced in the time you were focused on it, for the experienced people you brought in?
So for talent management, we supported the consultants that worked with business leaders to figure out what was required in the organization to help it grow, as well as the Aetna University team that produced content for learning throughout the organization. My team was the operations team. So we implemented anything that was part of the strategic plan. So whether it was booking venues, getting all of the materials together, getting the venue prepared for classes, reaching out to the candidates to if there was like pre-work that needed to be done. So it was doing all of the operational work for the classes. That was my talent management team. And then my talent acquisition team supported all of the recruiters. So it was doing all of the work to onboard the candidate. So once the recruiter made an offer and the candidate accepted, that experience then moved to my team.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
This reminds me that when Peter was doing a lot of corporate consulting over a phase of his career, he would have loved to have a team like you making sure everything was ready for him, right, Peter?
Yeah, I'm just thinking as Cristina was talking, what parts of this whole process were the most difficult? I mean, you're trying to get people to cooperate with you,
right.
And you're trying to get information from them that they may not readily even know they have. I'm a max introvert, and it would be really hard for me to do all of the initiating that this job seems to require.
So I think for me, the most liberating thing was when the leader of my organization said, this is the problem I want you to solve, but you figure out how to solve it. You come back and tell me how you've changed things, but I sort of had the reins to do what I needed to do. Mm-hmm. And it's great because I'm an extrovert. And so my challenge was really changing the views of the people that we were supporting. So one was my team. They were used to being very tactical and very operational and just kind of pushing buttons and moving things, online, but saying to them, if there's a problem, you have to pick up the phone and you need to consult with these candidates. And if there's an issue, you need to call them and say, I'm here for you. I'm your onboarding specialist. How can I help you? And so shifting that mindset for them to be doing something new and different and accessing different skills, that was a challenge, as well as our business partners.
Peter asked a really great question, which is knowing all that you learned in that process, how do you get other people to accept that information about change and then actually do it? Because it's now from one practice to a whole bunch of other practices. I know extroversion is part of it, but what's your secret sauce?
I think it's bringing people in on the work. So it's not doing things to people, it's bringing them in and collaborating. So for example, with talent acquisition, I met with the leadership team. I scheduled a call and I said, this is what my role is. This is what I'm trying to solve. What are your pain points? And so identifying how my team could help their team do their work better, because we are their support team. And what else could I identify that could help really create a delineation between what's a recruiter and what's the operations team, because there was a lot of blurry stuff happening.
Sure.
So being able to say to them, you're no longer going to need to do these things because this really belongs on my team. That went over really well. Because for me, I was a recruiter at one point in my Aetna journey, and recruiters should be recruiting. And you can't do that and, manage business leaders and understand their strategy and who they're trying to bring on for roles if you're doing all of that tactical operational things,
Yep.
filling out papers and, doing all this kinds of things. So it was creating more streamline, making the work make more sense, but then also figuring out who should be doing this work. So the ability to take things from them and give them some capacity went over really well.
You figured it out.
Yeah.
Am I hearing you right that there's some kind of interaction with the computer here?
Yes.
I keep thinking I hear the word computer as though it were a player in this whole process.
It is.
Talk about that.
Because the candidate in this day and age anyway, the way that the candidate tells us that they're interested in a role, they have to go online and apply and upload their resume, and then that data has to be reviewed by the recruiter. And then when the candidate gets identified, it's the way the recruiter works with the leader to say, here are some resumes, and take a look and tell me what you think. And then as the person is identified and moves through the hiring process, that's all through a system. And the way that my team then gets the candidates that we need to onboard is through the system. And when we send them off to get a background check, so everything is integrated and all the data is just moving through different work streams, even through the time that we onboard people and say, we're trying to collect data from you in order to create your employee profile. And so we need these things from you. It's really what makes everything kind of go around.
Do you ever hear from candidates or new hires that it does seem kind of mechanical? I'm just thinking myself, if I were going through this process, I would ask myself, well, when do I get to talk to a human being here?
Right.
And find out somebody who can understand who I really am and why I really want to be considered by it, and so forth. Do you ever hear anything like that from any of the candidates? Maybe after they've been in the job for a while and have some security, they might mention something if they were even feeling that way.
Absolutely. So part of my process was in determining what was broken. The only way to know that from a candidate is to engage with them.
Yes.
So I did feel as though candidates were struggling with, I have an issue, who do I call? I can't access this portal. What do I do? I'm stuck because loop that I can't get out of.
So you do reach out to some of those folks to find out what the human side of the experience is, huh?
So what I chose to do was manage escalations. So if a recruiter reached out and said, my person is really struggling, I would reach out and figure out why and where is this chain broken. And that helped me develop the strategy on my team to transition my team from being transactional to being an onboarding consultant and reaching out to candidates. It's how I was able to transition the model.
Great idea.
was by listening to candidates and where the issues were.
Cool.
How much of all of this work, Cristina, did you know you were getting into when you took this position?
Maybe 20% of it. So the leader, after I accepted and started with her, said, I didn't really want to tell you everything that, we needed to do, because I really wanted you to take the role.
Might have scared you away.
Now for the good news.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you said a moment ago, Cristina, that that's something that you've always wanted in your work. You've always said, give me something that I can grow from and learn from, and the more open-ended, the better sometime. And I know your whole history in that company, and we could go through the rest of this podcast with the different titles you've occupied. It's always been about 20% of what the company intends you to learn and do.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think that, like, part of what I enjoy doing is coming in and making things better. And so I really didn't want roles where if it was meant to just status quo and just kind of run things the way that they've always been run, that wasn't really where my interest was. It was, how do I come in, assess what's happening, touch all of the people that are impacted by the work that we do, and how do I make that experience better? How do I leave this better than when I started? And that's always been what has motivated me to move to a new role. It was sort of fixing what was broken. I really enjoy process improvement. So being able to identify where things are not working and enhancing them, that's really what's motivated me. So I feel like when I get to the end is when I know that this can stand up on its own and someone else can come in and continue the work and just keep it moving. That's it's time for me to move.
I don't know what the signal problem is, but maybe because there's a word for that practice that my colleague Steve at Cavallari and I used when we wrote Inside Knowledge, and that word is bricoleur. A bricoleur. It's someone who likes to fix things. Mm-hmm. It's an old-fashioned word for always noticing when things don't seem to be working as well as they could, figuring out how to fix them, doing what it takes with others to fix them, but always moving on. It's really uncanny that when I wrote that, it was around the time that you were still in my student life, and that whole notion became a powerful character in our book. Peter?
What was the word that you and Steve made up?
We didn't make it up. We used it. Bricoleur. It's a French word for a Mr. Fix-It. A bricoleur. Oh. And you're much better at vocabulary than I am, so maybe we didn't use the word properly. But too late now. The book's already out in print. No one's reading it anyway.
It doesn't include French slang.
But this is what I'm hearing in Cristina's account of the current things that she is working on are very much like the ways of change that she's been involved in this very dynamic company in the years she's been there. And my question when we started was, why are you so growthful? What is your intention within those experiences? You're filling your toolkit, but have you noticed anything else about yourself that you hoped would get better too as you moved ahead?
Yeah, I never thought I'd be a leader. I thought I would, sort of work on process and be led to do things. But I think what's happened over time and over my experiences is that I want to take over. I want to own something, and I want to create process and create something out of nothing and own it and lead it. So this new role was that opportunity to not just process improve and create something new, but also lead a team. Mm-hmm. And that I didn't see coming.
You mentioned that several times you referred to your team. How big was this team?
So I had about 12 people on my team, and some of them were overseas. So it was through like a third party consultant. So I had people in India as well as here domestically.
Oh, so that puts you in the position of exercising leadership. I don't even know what the words are. Exercising leadership through the. Help me out here, Dave.
Well, I was going to say virtually, but then I
Yeah,
was thinking, well,
that's the right word.
virtually, but is it virtuous to try to lead someone
Well,
you never get to see them? And she's had a lot of direct experience in that. So what was that like to have a team? Some you could actually step in a room with, and a lot of them, and a lot of the time, even in those in the room are doing what we're doing right now, interacting virtually.
Yeah, it was, one of the things that I get when I start new roles is that people say you don't really do things how everyone else does it. And and I get that a lot. I tend to, I say my team, but we were all a team. And so it was, how do I get everybody, even if it's virtually, around the table and collaborate? And the team in India had never had that. They were viewed as just being operational and doing repetitive work. And so they had never really been engaged. And so I invited them to my staff meetings and had one-on-one calls with them. And whenever we had policy changes, I made sure that we sat with them and explained what was going on and what was changing. And so their feedback was that's never happened before. We sort of are forgotten um, and just assume that we're just going to do sort of this repetitive work. And my feeling always was, you're doing work for us, and if you don't understand the value of your work and what you are producing for us and how it connects, it doesn't make any sense. You're sort of out there doing work that you don't know how valuable it is or how time sensitive it is, or if you do X, Y happens. And so how do you know that if you're not, plugged in? So I manage my team as one team.
And did the people, were there any other cultures beside India that were involved in your team?
I would say that even here domestically, it's different. Leading,
Sure.
People that are, male and female, and people that come from different backgrounds,
Yeah, yeah.
educational levels, like all of that is very diverse. So my team is very
Sure.
diverse. Yeah.
The places that you support in various roles in this country can be anywhere from the eastern part of Texas to, central Connecticut. And
hmm
as I recall, some of the things you shared with my classes over the years, in some of your roles, you had to really connect with people in other places in the country, particularly during big mergers, where they were quite nervous about what this company was going to do through an acquisition or merger or whatever. So, what did you learn about the cultures? Because you did it, you figured it out. How did you work in all these different cultures into one sort of mindset of your mindset?
Yeah, I think because me myself am, diverse. I think it's having that sensitivity that not everybody communicates the same way or receives information the same way, and people are experiencing different things either where they live or with their leadership team. And so for me, even with this transition with CVS acquiring Aetna, it was about being completely transparent with my team and just communicating and over communicating and making sure that we were taking that journey together. And so for us, it was quite challenging because we knew early in 2019 what the future state of the HR organization was going to look like. And so there were a lot of people that were told at that time they would be laid off in December of that year. And so how do you keep a team engaged for a year knowing that at the end, they're going to be laid off? And so for me, it was keeping them motivated and giving them as much information as I could about what that journey was going to look like, and that the work we were doing was very important. So yeah, it's challenging, but I think communication was really the biggest thing that my team gave me as feedback, was that they never felt like they were in the dark.
Was it because of the merger that they were going to be laid off?
Yes, because we had duplicate HR teams.
I'm sorry, because what?
We had duplicate HR teams. So CVS had their own HR organization and we had ours, and it was a matter of who would be identified in what roles, and then the others would be let go.
CVS acquired Aetna, several $1 billion worth of acquisition. So it was an extraordinary change. Of all the other changes that Christine has been part of, that company, this one was the most impactful in the long term. And during this year that you held people together, did you keep most of them stick with it right to the end of their known term there?
Yeah, all but one.
Wow.
I was able to redeploy a few, knowing that they would lose their roles on my team. I went out and kind of did a roadshow and found where I think there were connections in their skill set and where I thought they'd add value, and I found them roles in other parts of the organization. And yeah, so all but one left.
This is CBS, the television people?
No, it's a drugstore company.
Oh, CVS. Oh, okay.
Yeah, CVS.
Right.
I don't know if you have them out there in Minnesota, but
yeah, we do.
Yeah.
The first time I heard about them, Dave, was in Stores, Connecticut, at the University of Connecticut. They had a store.
Probably one of the first ones. Yeah.
Was it?
Consumer Brands or something they used to call themselves, but I was there at the same time, Christina, in Stores when Peter's family was living there, and just having a drugstore come into that part of the neck of the woods was pretty remarkable. We had to drive all the way to Willimantic to get stuff. But yeah, they've been around a long time. But this was one of the most publicized acquisitions in recent time, and it. Not to get too deep into the weeds here, but it is significant that one of the many experiences that Cristina has been given, one of those 2080 experiences, was to conduct projects with the CEO of the company, who was part of that whole acquisition process, and then he left the company, retired. But so she had early warning and early experience that, of course, she can't talk about. But it's, again, another way that she has been growthful.
Sure.
Because that person entrusted with her some of these very sensitive projects. So congratulations on that, Cristina.
Thank you.
But it did happen, and she has had to figure things out. Now, I have on my camera one of the best explainers and teachers about leadership that I've ever known, this guy Peter Vale. Peter, are you hearing something about leadership in her story?
Well, yes, and my mind is back on the cultural thing. Talk about motivating people to stay committed, even though they know they're going to be laid off. And if you add cultural differences to that, the layoff can mean one thing in one context and quite another thing in another context. I can hear some of them going, "No, Mom and Dad, I'm not being fired. No, I'm not being fired.
Right.
It's because of the merger that they just don't need as many people like me as we used to need. No, I'm not being fired."
I
had to say that to my kids, Peter.
Yeah, she has two lovely kids, and this was coming in, in the schoolyard, to saying, "Hey, I heard your mom." No. But, that's another thing you've experienced, so, Christina, is that you had the same deadline, December 31st, and you had, and by the way, congratulations on finishing your master's in human resources. Just finished that, Peter. So she has now a
at
master's.
Central Connecticut?
No,
No, I did it through an online university, through Ashford University. They're through the Forbes School of Business.
Well, that's another experience entirely.
Yes.
Well, that gets to one of the things that keeps Peter and me conjecturing like crazy, and that is that we look at this theory-practice connection, and here you were taking those courses primarily online for all those months, being exposed to the concepts and, discussions about concepts, and yet you were living something that I don't think many human beings in the country have experienced firsthand. So, can you, not to critique that, but were you able to see the bridges and make them, or were they faculty helpful in making those bridges so that you could easily cross between theory and practice?
I think it was. I think about it, and I think the timing was just perfect, because I had so much content for every class. It was everything related. And so all of my work that I submitted all had to do with what was going on at the time. I didn't, a lot of the assignments were go out and find a story or find a company that, has done this or gone through this. Like, oh, what's happening right now? And so all of my content was on Aetna. Yeah.
That's fascinating. And did you have any face-to-face contact with the instructor or with other students?
No, we did very similar, Doc, to your classes where we had like the portal and we had to submit our work and go in multiple times through the week and read through other people's work and comment. So everything was online, either through email or in the portal. The professors were always made themselves available if we needed them. But it was mostly through web chat that we connected. So no in person and no face to face for the most part.
That's such a different experience. It would be a tremendous learning experience for me to transfer my style and my values and the content I have to impart. It would be a tremendous learning experience for me to move over into that context, especially working with bright, motivated students like yourself who are paying good money for a meaningful experience. The truth would be that on my first day in a class like that, I'd have to tweak. Well, folks, I'm just a learner here myself, and so we're going to learn together. And someone like yourself might stop and say, "Hey, wait a minute! I didn't know I was signing up for courses taught by people who had never done this before."
You probably met a couple of those, didn't you, Christina?
Yeah. Who were, and I think it took a little bit of getting used to in the beginning, but the professors were really good about, sort of teeing up the class, giving their biography. Sometimes our assignments would be to do a video of ourselves and, talk through content. Or present content and then upload the video. And so we got to watch each other. And as I got through the program, you started to see names repeat. And so there were other students that, you get familiar with names. It's like, oh, hey, we're back in another class together. And so then you have somebody to bounce things off of and ask questions.
Sure.
Different, but I thought it was a great experience.
Well, and it's also because you're more than a full-time in your job, huge responsibility. And you had a practice called being a wife and mother, and probably a number of other things that you love to do with your time. So one of the reasons this trend has become so prominent is that this is about the only way that a person in your situation can achieve a master's degree at all. Because
Absolutely.
the idea of coming to campus or whatever the other options used to be, you'd have to rule out. Yet now you have a lot of different experience there and a credential. Is it important that you have this credential for your forward mobility?
I honestly did it for me. I wasn't really looking at what it would do for me professionally. It was a something that was on my my vision board. It was, something that I knew I needed to do for me. And I think the greatest thing about the timing, I feel like when I got my bachelor's degree, even though I was working at Aetna, I was much younger, and I don't know that I appreciated everything that I was learning or made the right connections. And I think getting my master's degree now, further in my career and in the role that I was in, and going through what we were going through with CVS, really was it was sort of eye-opening. It was just learning things that I knew I had learned before, but they all made sense now. And just being able to make those connections and bring what I was learning into my work, whether it was how I was leading my team or managing change. I just feel like the timing couldn't have been better.
The timing in terms of your own career or
Yes.
your own, okay. Yeah.
But it was
Well,
also on your bucket list. It's something you felt
Yeah,
as you
I
moved
had
into
to
this
do.
stage of your life that if you don't do it now, when? And I
Right.
love that you said you did it primarily for yourself, even though the credential does help in the world ahead
Hmm.
that you're aimed when they, you know how it works. The resume doesn't show a master's degree in that bucket. It shows a
Right.
master's degree in this bucket.
Right.
It's a kind of a little bit mechanical, but that plus back to the growthful again. That sounds like you managed this time to make sure that those experiences with theory made better sense for you and how you would
Hmm.
put those ideas into practice. And then you had a chance to actually do that with this
Right.
open-ended job that you have
Yeah,
nearly.
it was really learning, like truly learning while I was going to school and applying it instantly.
Hmm.
Um, and even, I had to take like employment law. I was going
Cool.
through changing contracting in the work that I was doing with CVS. And so it just everything applied as I was going through identifying my work and cataloging it and figuring out who the future content owner would be. And it just all of it was so relatable that it made it really it made it less of a struggle because it was a lot of work and it was very condensed. So I was moving through classes in 6-week increments.
Wow.
So an entire semester was, kind of shoved into a 6-week time frame.
All that
It was
reading, all that, everything had to be done.
yeah.
Hmm.
But I think it would have been more of a struggle if that, if sort of the magic didn't happen and the timing wasn't right. I think it would have been harder.
I hesitate to bring this up. And by the way, I have you both on the screen again.
Yay.
Uh,
God knows why.
well, there you go. You're gone.
Oh no, I think it's when we're taught.
I should not have mentioned it. Anyway, Christina, it strikes me that a person like yourself might be in kind of a what's next frame of mind when it comes to further education
Yeah,
for yourself. Does that make any sense?
it does. It does. Throughout my journey at Aetna, I've always been learning. So I was, either going to conferences or taking courses at work through our university program. It was just constantly looking at what do I need to add? What am I missing? What could I refine? And so now that I have the master's degree, it's how am I going to keep that momentum moving? and I've thought about like certifications, perhaps pursuing a PhD at some point. So, just kind of looking at, what makes sense because, I have kids and they'll be going off to school. Marlon will, in 2 years, will be graduating high school. So,
Yeah.
Wow. Peter knows
yeah,
what that's like.
yeah,
And so do I. Yeah. But if in your near future there will be even more managerial leadership responsibilities, then the content of what you would be looking at ahead might be more at the kind of the strategic levels and
right,
sort of the bigger long range picture kind of thing. Does that make sense? You'd
absolutely,
be kind of tuning your ear for that as well.
absolutely. Hmm.
Well, I hesitate to mention it, but as you probably are aware, there are lots of online doctorates around. Um, and in fact, I was a faculty member of the Antioch program, although they're not totally online. 4 times a year, everybody in the program gets together for a 3 or 4 day conference. But most of the time, the interaction with students and with other faculty members is online. It's a darn good program. And there are several others.
Yeah. Well,
I think,
the school I just got my master's from, has already reached out. Have you thought about getting another degree with us? So I said, well, let me get another, because the fortunate thing, my relationship with Aetna has been extremely positive and beneficial, and I think to the both of us. I have been um, loyal and have invested in Aetna, but they have invested in me. And so I've gotten my bachelor's with them, I got my master's degree with them, and so I said, well, wait until I get another employer and then they can pay for my for my education.
Yeah, let's be practical, Peter. Those folks did pay to take those courses with you. But, I think it's great that Peter mentioned that, Christina, because uh, that stage of Peter's career, formal teaching career, was when Antioch was one of the very few that were offering not only a doctoral in leadership, but also for people who were actually practitioners, not
Hmm.
strictly people who wanted to get a PhD in order to enter take the oath and become a professor.
Right.
And Peter, you're listening to Christina, and you used to listen to your students, your practitioner leader students. Do you hear some resonance there? Does she sound like someone you would have loved to have taught?
oh, I think so. Yeah,
You
you
can't
you
say
would have
no to
been a
that.
lot of you would have been a lot of fun to teach. And actually, you remind me of the experience. If I can take a minute, the experience I had, the very first experience I had when I began teaching in the Antioch program, with all the online. Dave, as you and I both know, when a student hands you a paper to read, maybe it's something as ambitious as a thesis, but maybe it's just a term paper or a long analysis of something that they want your feedback on. When they hand it to you, you put it in your in basket and you wait until they're coming in again, which might be in a week or a month or whenever, and you read it just before they come in. You read the paper just before they come in.
Don't give away any secrets now.
That's the way I used to work. Well, in the online environment, when the student sends you, say, a 50-page
Attachment.
outline of their dissertation or something by email, just like when you send anybody an email, you expect them to read it and get right back to you. And I was totally unprepared for a student to send me 50 pages of hard work on their part and expect a turnaround of just a few hours or days. And the things I heard about it fairly soon. Why isn't Professor Vale reading my work?
He's lazy.
And I had never gotten feedback like that in my entire career.
That's right. Did you adapt?
Yeah, oh yes, oh yes.
I know you did.
If you can believe this, Dave, you're going to want to edit this out, but if you can believe it, my computer is now feeding back to me the words I'm saying to you. I'm reading, if you can believe it, the word so I'm saying to you is scrolling across my screen. And I don't know where in the heck it came from.
I don't know if I'll edit that out, because I think one of the many things we've said about practice over the months, Peter, is that you never know when something crazy is going to happen. And we also have quite a long conversation, Christina, about this, what we call social technical connections and the interweaving of of the social and the technical, which you've already referred to a couple of times in this conversation. But Peter's laptop is on a different planet. So
I don't know. I'm not doing anything. It's not as if
you're being good.
As if I'm some kind of a mad hacker who's trying to do all kinds of tricks with this stupid thing.
Yeah, I've never seen one do a simultaneous captions. Have you, Christina? Have you ever seen that? I've never seen it. So, you may have discovered something, Peter, that we'd all...
Oh, and there's a box here that says it's listening to me, and then it's going to start feeding back.
Oh, dear God. Well, I think we've got to move this along a little faster, because I don't want to lose you, and we really have learned so much, I think, and I know you would agree.
Yeah, I appreciate your time a whole lot, Christina.
From this colleague of ours.
Likewise, I'm happy to do it.
Let's see if we can come up with just one more probe here to get a sense of why you have kept yourself, Christina, sane and on a track. Not on the track necessarily your company laid out for folks, but your track. Is there something in your head, a GPS system, something that keeps you on a direction that's favorable to your growth and beneficial to your family and all the rest of us who are your friends? What keeps you on track?
I think it's just the way I'm wired. Is I was trying to say this to my niece as well, who is starting college, and I'm coaching, and I said to her, I write everything down. Like, I have a journal that I keep, and I jot things down, and I make a plan, and I always vet ideas and figure out pros and cons. The idea of going back for my master's degree has been on my plan for years. It just wasn't the right timing. But I just feel like I have to keep moving. And whether that's being happy in the role I'm doing, but getting mentoring from, somebody in the organization, or taking, classes, or sitting in on a lecture. I'm just constantly trying to evolve. It's like I said, I can't keep still. I need to keep it moving, and whether I'm reading articles or doing research on my own. I don't know. I feel like I'm still growing, and I'm trying to evolve, and trying to impact people on my journey, and I just keep moving. Yeah.
Well, actually, Christina, the question I have for you is somewhat related to that. Do I understand that you have a position you're going to now?
Yes.
Do you have any expectations? Do you have any expectations of what new kinds of tools might be available in this new position? Do you know enough about it to speculate a little bit?
Yeah, I do, but I have to tell you that what I think is going to be new for me is starting in a new organization. So I've worked at Aetna for 24 and a half years. I've walked into the same building for 22 of those years, through different entrances depending on where I was working, but it was always the same location. I felt that even though I moved through the organization and tried new things and worked on new teams, fundamentally I was in the same place. So I still had my network and I had a support system and I had my mentors and my coaches and
And you have people you could say hi to and good morning to.
exactly. It was people I could have coffee with and have lunch with. And so I think my new skill set is adaptability. It's learning a new organization from scratch because it's getting to know the hierarchy, why they're in existence, what's their strategy, how does that relate to the work I'm doing, meeting new people and figuring out new personalities, being the new kid on the block and trying to figure out how to influence. So yeah, I have a lot in my head about what I need to refine and pull out of my toolbox in order to put new things in.
You got to make some room in that box.
I do. gotta get a bigger box.
Or carry a bigger box, but you're a relatively tiny person, so be careful about that.
And you have to think out of the box too.
That's right.
To make a small pun.
But as we are moving into our last few minutes, I must say that what Cristina has just told us is not a giant leap now. Out of where imagine you've been in the same town your whole life, and now you're going to move to the other side of the country and start all over, and you don't know anyone. In many ways, that's the case because it's not only a new company, but it's also a whole different product and a whole different way of serving the world. I admire the heck out of you for taking that leap, whether it was voluntary. You were ready anyway, weren't you, to try something absolutely brand new? So, what's your best hope and your worst fear?
My best hope is that I find a new place where I can, kind of hang my hat and add value and be valued. People that will see what I bring to the table and be excited about it is my best hope. My worst fear is cultural fit. The culture at Aetna has always been positive and people are good to one another and they try to help each other. And I know that not all cultures are the same. And so, that is the part that I think about is it's a new company, so I'm not really sure what I'm walking into. And is it collaborative? Are the people welcoming? And so that's something that I'll see.
Yeah, and if it turns out it's not quite what you hope it would be, there's some learning to be done there too.
Right.
And they need to do some learning because if you're there and as a newbie and you're not getting very good experience and you're very direct and very clear and kind in your words, then they will learn from you. Hey, I've just done a lot of work in figuring out how to onboard people. My previous company, my onboarding experience has some cracks in it. Let's discuss that. So good luck on that. And Peter, we're almost out of time. Any last thoughts or words for
just one
my student and now my teacher, Cristina?
One observation, Cristina, as we've talked to you and you've shared so much of yourself here. We don't yet know how collaborative the overall corporate culture is of the place you're going to, but I can tell from the way you have talked that you will find the collaborators. There are always some around. Yeah. And you will find the collaborators, and they will begin to perceive you that way. And so, even if it's an overall cutthroat environment, you will have a nest of like-minded folks that will help to keep you sane while you figure out what next to do.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree. Amen to that. Well, we are at the end of our time, and Cristina Mitusina, boy, it is such a relief to have had this conversation, because this is our first. And the relief is that last week when Peter and I said maybe we should start bringing in some other folks, we weren't quite sure how that was going to go. Peter, would you give us a good grade on how this conversation went?
Incomplete.
Ah! He gave me one of those grades once when I was only a day late, Peter. Jesus, oh my God, he's awful strict.
No, I was just thinking to myself as you started talking, Dave. I was just thinking to myself, so this has gone a lot more. It's a lot richer and more interesting than I just didn't know whether I was worried that Dave and I would be able to stay out of the way, so to speak, and let the person tell their story. And I think we've done that to at least a greater degree than I worried that we might do, that we might just take over the conversation. And I didn't, of course, want that to happen.
Neither did I. Would you grade us then on how we did?
Would I?
Cristina?
I think it went great. I think this is a great
Good.
This is a great way to just get information from other people. I think you guided the conversation really well. So thank you. I really enjoyed being your guest.
Now, are you going to be listening to our podcast on practice?
I will.
Okay, good. It's going to be on the air pretty soon. You'll be sure to get a link. But this project in collaboration for Peter and me is going to be indefinitely interesting, because there's always, now we're bringing in some folks, and I'm sure they'll do justice to this opportunity as well as you have. But thank you very much, and I am going to conclude our session.
All right.
Thank you.